Cool. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Modern Craftsman YouTube Live, or the podcast if you're listening later on.
YouTube Live.
YouTube Live, dude. This is one. I think this is one of the coolest things that we've implemented.
Going live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people watch stuff live on YouTube?
You know, I don't know.
I mean,
I just like the idea of it. The fact that someone. I mean, there's one person watching right now.
I just mean in general. For our generation, it wasn't a thing. I would assume our kids' generation, it will be a thing. But I don't know. I'm not. I look up stuff specifically on YouTube, but I'm not just like constantly on YouTube. Like it's when I need to look up something, but like the kids watch YouTube videos and YouTube shows and YouTube series.
I know,
it's just
and
different.
I was saying to Meg the other day, I'm like, hey, I feel like we gotta cool it with the YouTube stuff. Some of this stuff is trash.
I wanted to. I
shut my lights off.
I wanted to. I want to pull the iPads away from not as much Selby, but Tilly. Just it's becoming it's becoming too much.
Yeah, you gotta like. Not you basically gonna control when, and I mean we're pretty good about it, but like in the home, like it's almost never in the house. But if they're in the car, it's like, yeah, dude, watch your iPad.
Yeah, car's good. I actually don't know what I'd do if it weren't for the iPad in the car.
Yeah, Indy is brutal.
Really?
Marley and Reed have always just kind of chilled. Indy, it's like you put her in the seat and she just screams. But if she's in my truck, she's fine. In Meg's car, will like bloody murder, just scream the whole time.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
I don't have patience for that.
I put her in my truck, but you know what I think it is I don't talk. Like when the kids are in the car, especially if there's only one of them. Oftentimes I just drive in silence by myself all day, so I forget like when people are in the car to talk. And then I was going somewhere with Reed the other day, and we were driving for a while, and all of a sudden I was like, realized I hadn't said anything to him, and I was like, "How was your day?" He goes, "It was good."
And that was it.
I was like, "What'd you do?" And he goes, "Science." I was like, "Oh, what'd you do in science?" "Stuff." I'm like, "All right." It's just funny.
It's like pulling teeth. I was with Selby the other day. I forget where we were driving. It was just me and her. Oh, softball. And I usually try and engage with them when it's just us, but you ask them questions and they're somewhere else. They're thinking about something else, and it's generally one word answers. So it gets to the point where like maybe it's just easier to sit here and not say anything.
Yeah, it's just funny. I don't know. It's but going back to India, it's like I'll put her in the car, and I think the fact that there's no one else to talk to, or sometimes I'll just have the music on, and she just sits there and chills.
Yeah.
There was one time when we were driving home from New Hampshire that Meg's always like, if we drive two cars, Meg's like, "You have Indy." I'm like, "Okay," and because she's usually good, but we were coming home one day, and I gotta sneeze. And it's
gonna be a big one. You're gonna blow snot all over.
Blow out the microphone. And she fell asleep, but then she woke right back up, and she was screaming. And I finally she started choking, and I'm like, dude, I'm in the middle of the highway. I gotta get off the highway.
Yeah.
And it's like it was progressively getting worse and worse and worse. And I pull over into a rest stop, and I get her out, and she's like inconsolable, like choking, like almost can't breathe. And I'm like, okay, let's just go. We're gonna go for a walk. I get her out of the car. She calms down. I go in the store, and of course, like it's one of those big rest stops where like the ceilings are like 30 feet tall.
Yeah.
We get in, she starts screaming again, and it's like echoing. I'm
echoing through the whole place.
I'm like, I don't even care.
It's not my kid. I just found her.
Yeah. And I bring her into the store, and I get her a lollipop and cookies and juice and milk. I mean, water, and it's like nothing is calming her down. And I'm like, this is all the stuff you want. And dude, it was just like she finally went back asleep like 30 minutes later.
I never did well with that. Selby was a very irritable baby. She just like very discontent all the time, and I struggled from day one with just the senseless crying. You just want to calm them down and you can't, and it just stresses me out even more. And it gets to the point where I'm like, I have to walk out of here or else I'm going to just go insane. Rachel was always fine with it. She's like, it's fine. They're just a baby, just screaming in her face. Like, I don't know how you remain calm right now.
Yeah, it's brutal. But
So we have a couple new partnership announcements to make.
we do. So
I know that
Go ahead.
I know that we spoke. I mean, I spoke about it last week that Andersen is on board for the podcast and creating some supplemental content with Doug. We have a trip out there soon.
Yeah, end of March, I believe.
Yeah.
And just for the record, guys, like when Tyler talks about supplemental content, obviously it's going to revolve around video. This is part of Modern Craftsman brand and what we're growing this into. But we had an epic meeting with Ellie about some of the content that we wanted to create. And as long as their corporate heads are okay with us doing our thing,
Yeah,
I would say that this video content's going to be humorous.
yeah. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. And like I had mentioned on the last podcast, I know that I'm very grateful for these partnerships and for the relationship that we established with Ellie and them kind of believing in us and partnering with us and sharing a lot of the same goals, for the industry. What they're looking to do for the industry and how they're looking to provide value and reinvest in the industry and the growth, and how all of this is basically investing in the people within the construction industry. I'm super grateful for, because it's giving us an opportunity to kind of carve out some time and put more of our efforts and more resources into this, which, yeah, obviously it's a partner. Like, there's ad reads involved, but at the end of the day, they don't have to do that. They're willing to partner with us and invest in us. And at the end of the day, that's a direct investment. And like, there's a direct return for the listeners of this podcast because of companies like Andersen. So I'm super grateful for that, for everything that Ellie's done, for kind of getting us in touch with the right people. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, they've been a partner in a smaller fashion in other things that we've done, and they've always been there in massive support. So to have them part of the Modern Craftsman brand is pretty special. And like Tyler said, we're incredibly grateful for a partnership like that. And to add to that, we get to announce another partnership that we're launching this year, and that is with Buildertrend. And I mean, I'm stoked about it because, number one, they just had a massive rollout of updates on their software. And I've worked with them in the past. We still work with them in Materia, but they have always been a huge advocate and center for the industry. Their team is massive. They have massive, but they also have always had an ear on the ground as to what's going on and being part of it and supporting it and listening. And I had said this a long time ago, even before we had a partnership, is that what I loved about visiting their headquarters in Nebraska was that when you walked in, they had equal amount of people selling the product as they did, if not more people supporting the people that had already purchased and been there for, I think they call it CX, customer experience. I think I may have made that up, but not either way. But the point being is their software continues to adapt based on user feedback.
Yeah.
And if you in all of the events that I've been a part of and we've hosted, it's like that, they're the number one talked about software in that space. And previously it was, you had some people on co-construct, and if you don't already know, Buildertrend acquired Co-Construct. But it's just been it's great to partner with them because they are, you know, another advocate for what we're doing and what the industry needs, and, you know, making massive effort to, I mean, at the end of the day, put dollars back in our pocket, right? If we can be more efficient, you know, and that's through the use of software, that means we can make more money.
I mean, if you think about everything that we stand for on the podcast and our own personal brands, our own business brands, and kind of what's important to us and what separates us and what we're looking to give back to the industry and what we're looking to promote and how we are looking to make a difference, these partners are doing the exact same thing, because you can talk the talk as much as you want, but then to step up and invest in our platform and our business and our company and our podcast and our brand is just proof that they stand for everything that we stand for and more. That they're willing to put money into this and kind of reinvest in the industry. So a ton of credit goes to them for what they're doing, and, you know, reinvesting in us and putting this money back into the industry and helping. And, you know, we have a ton of love for them and for what they're doing for us. So it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's greatly appreciated.
Amen. Well, with that being said, let's dig into so this week we have a question from Rob. I always pronounce his last name wrong, and I shouldn't, because I've
I feel
talked
like
to
it's
that
just DelBiondo, but
DelBiondo. And he's gonna listen to this and he's gonna be super pissed off because I've probably had no less than 20 conversations with him. But he had
just about his last name.
I'm gonna that will be the next one. But he had asked, what's next for us, you know, you and I, Tyler, professionally. And he goes on to say that, you know, we're both approaching perceived ceilings in your respective fields, and will there ever be I am comfortable here moment for either of us?
First off, do you think that there's a ceiling?
No.
I don't either.
And I know he does. Like, I'm gonna assume he doesn't either. But there's something that he feels as though we're approaching whatever it might be.
He must know that I'm 37. He's like, yeah, he's
old.
peaking. He's peaking. He's on his way down.
You know, I'm sure you make so many people mad when you talk about being 37
probably
and
because
old.
they're probably older.
Yeah. Shout out to everyone that's older than us that listens to
Hell yeah. No, so I thought about his question, and I penned down some responses to that. And then at the end of that, I thought to myself, is there really a ceiling?
All right.
And like I understand that that's not what he's saying, but I get it as well. But I would like to kind of preface that I think that the ceiling is kind of wherever you set it. And while you may exhaust your capacity within a certain field or within a certain sector of our industry or your industry, I think that there is an opportunity to always take it to the next level, to grow. And I think that if you don't, or you feel as though there is not an option to grow anymore, that it's time to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily think that you don't have to bail on the entire industry, but I think that it's time to kind of explore other avenues, and then you tie them into your existing path. And I think that just kind of raises that ceiling.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I was listening to a podcast this morning. Actually, I'm sorry. No, I'm listening to a book, and I'm going to give the recommendation because everyone always messages us after. And I just started it. So it's The Happiness Advantage. And it's the 7 principles of positive psychology that fuel success and performance at work. And one of the things it said in the beginning of the book, since that's where I am, is it talks about this ever moving goalpost. and it directly relates it to being happy, and it talks about our whole life. Like there's always once I get my license, I'll be happy, or once I turn 18, I'll be happy,
Yeah.
or once I get that raise, I'll be happy, or once I get that promotion, I'll be happy. And we relate success. I'm paraphrasing here, but like we constantly relate success to being what makes us happy. And my understanding of what this book is kind of going to tell is talking about flipping that and being first be happy and then you'll be successful.
What?
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, and it's just interesting because like I've never really thought of it in that way where you always attribute to something that is quote unquote the success of something that would allow you to then be happy.
Yeah.
And and I think this relates back to the ceiling and having a perceived ceiling, where I just there's constantly things like, oh, if I could just get through this estimate, I'll be happy. Or if I could finally just switch my business to building only new construction, I'll be happy. It's like you got to learn to be happy with what you have and then allow growth to happen and not be this constant.
If you're looking for milestones and checkpoints and like validation,
right.
instead of finding happiness and then like getting that experience. And I think that that's very similar. Um, like you're saying, well, I'll be happy once I get this, or, I'll be happy if I
Mhm.
were to live somewhere else. And you realize that it's not about where you are or what you're doing. It's all internal.
Mhm.
And that happiness, like it's not going to be generated from getting a new truck
Mhm.
or from a milestone within your business. And that can contribute to happiness in the moment, but not like overall state of being emotional happiness. Why did you choose to listen or read to this book?
Oftentimes it's recommended through a podcast or another book I'm reading. So I always add it to like the want to read list. And I started another one, which I might as well pull it up. Um, is called The One Thing. And the one thing is about, focusing on one thing rather than a bunch of things. And when you
Yeah.
focus on one thing, you
How's
can
that going for you?
I actually decided meanwhile, I'm reading 2 books, right? I actually stopped that book because the more I listened to it, the more it just seemed very broad.
Yeah.
And I also maybe I don't like it because I'm like, but
Yeah.
no, it did make me think about, like, am I focusing on too many things? And truthfully, and this kinda ties back to the question is, all right, well, what is next for us and what is next for me and the business? And I actually talked to right before we hopped on this podcast. I was talking to an old business coach of mine that we were just doing a casual check-in, and he was like, "It sounds like everything's going well." I'm like, "Well, I just told you all the good stuff."
Yeah.
Like I didn't tell you any of the bad stuff or the stuff I'm struggling with. But the reality is like, you know, going back to the one thing, I think that ultimately there is one thing I'm trying to accomplish, and there's a bunch of things that are fueling that. And and truthfully, the podcast was at one point, I'll say it, is like at one point something I considered giving up because I was like, I need to focus on work, or I need to focus on this, or family, or I need more of my attention needs to do this. And you know and we had that conversation offline, but ultimately it came back to the fact that this does tie back to what my greater goal is. But not only that, and my greater goal being like, I want to help the industry,
Yeah.
and as do you. And it's like, for me, I want to help the industry. I want to be an advocate for the industry. Let me rephrase that. And but I also want to build really cool homes. And having a podcast has benefits for both of those things.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, I could just focus on the podcast and it could be this wildly successful, you know, podcast that Spotify pays us $100 million because we're, so damn good.
That'd be
Um,
terrible.
but that's ultimately not my one thing.
What's this book called? The Happiness what?
So that was a different
Oh,
book.
yeah.
The other one is called The Happiness Advantage. So
Advantage.
my point is, you asked me why I started
Yeah.
listening to that. I forget where it was recommended. It might have been recommended in the one thing, to be honest. But I started reading it because as do many of us, sometimes we slip into sadness,
Mhm.
or not happy. And I am all like, most of my reading is how I can be better at something. And, whether that's a better husband, I've read books for that, a better father, I've read books for that, and a better self-disciplined person, or better at business, or better at whatever it is. It's always about kind of self-improvement. And I actually feel as though I'm a pretty happy person. Um, I feel fortunate for that. There's not a lot of times where I'm sad. Um, I certainly get upset or frustrated with things, but I'm never. It's very rare that I'm like really down.
Yeah.
And I wanted to read this book to understand kind of what advantage, as the name says, what advantage happiness could bring to the table. But I also think about, there's a lot of people in my life that aren't happy. And, and I struggle to have conversations sometimes with those people, because I'm afraid that my happiness is going to create like this sense of jealousy,
Yeah,
or
resentment.
resentment, right? Where it's, okay, well, how do I like reframe how happy I am, or the happiness I'm I have on a daily basis? How can I reframe that in a way that is helpful to someone, rather than just being like, well, just be happy? It's like, well,
Would you say that you find yourself to be actually happy or just content?
um no, I think I'm actually happy. I mean,
That's sick.
I
I mean,
there's plenty of times where I'm just content, for sure.
yeah.
But I,
I
I
guess
guess
I
it depends.
asked I listened to a podcast probably a year and a half ago, and I haven't really thought much about it until you brought this book up. And like one of the questions that kind of came to mind was, right, I've had books suggested for me, audiobooks. When you finish one, it'll come up, in your feed. I guess it's book algorithms. Um, and I usually listen to a small excerpt from them or read that, and it's either like they either hook you or don't. And I was kind of curious what hooked you here. Um, but one of the things about this podcast that they were saying is that like our world and social media and what we perceive to be um like the world that we live in is that, the happy people are happy all the time,
Mhm.
and that's the way it should be, when in actuality, like, you shouldn't be happy all the time. If you're happy all the time, something's wrong. Like, you need to have ups and downs to be able to stabilize. And we see everything that's put out across our plate right now that kind of comes into our periphery is just happy, like social
Mhm.
media. It's families and nice pictures, and no, like, that's just not accurate. So a lot of times for the people who aren't happy, it just makes it worse. Like it
Right.
it
And
compounds how unhappy they are, because they
mhm.
feel as though the world is happy. And I always thought, I just want to be happy.
Mhm.
Like, I want to be happy. This person's happy all the time. And it's very rare for people to actually be happy all the time.
I'm not happy all the time. I think
No, I
that
know.
yeah, I think that most of, if I had to pick a state that I'm in the most, it'd probably be content.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly more happy than I am sad.
Yeah.
And the content is usually, in comparison, right? Where it's like, oh, that, he's in better shape than me. I want to be in better shape, or, or he's building cooler things than me, and I want to build cooler things. And like in the moment, I'm content with what I have. But oftentimes, then it's like, no, no, I'm doing pretty damn good. Like
Yeah.
I'm moving where I want. I'm doing what I want. I'm making progress. I should be happy about that. But ultimately, I mean, there was something that I'm not going to make the reference because I forget where it came from, but it's, we choose we choose to be happy about things.
Mm-hmm.
We choose to be there's things that we choose that we decide as a human race that these are sad. And and I think we've talked about that before. It's the same for happy. It's like, this is how we've decided to be happy. But yeah, I think that especially through social media and what everyone's got going on, people are constantly comparing, and and then they slip into sadness. And I see that amongst people that are close to me, where it's and whether it's like directly to me or I hear it on the back end, where it's like, they don't like me because I'm succeeding at what I'm doing, or I'm doing what I like. So and there becomes that resentment, which to me is just wild. I'm like, I'm not trying to create resentment. I would rather, like, hey, let's talk about it. Let me offer some advice. When the reality is most people don't want advice.
No,
Most
it's
people are like, just shut up. Like, I don't care about what you like. I'm gonna just let me be sad. Let me be upset about what I have going on in my life, or what I don't have going on in my life. It's the cards I'm dealt with. Because I don't believe that. If I just took what was given to me, I would be in a very different place in my life.
yeah.
In every in every way.
I think that, I mean, it's the whole chasing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that if you understand that it's all of these goals and these kind of set points that you have are not actually what's going to bring you happiness, and you stop trying to chase that happiness, I think that creates a lot of frustration, especially for the people who just generally aren't as happy, because you think that something's going to happen and all of a sudden it's going to shift or it's going to change, and I think that just gets you even more frustrated. And I think that if you kind of chase bettering yourself and being the best version of yourself, and you celebrate growth and
Mm-hmm.
small victories rather than, hey, when I get to this point. And it makes me think, even about, maybe it was during an exercise that the guy was saying, you train for a race,
Mm-hmm.
and you get in shape and you diet and you exercise, and the race is not like, that's the goal there, but that's not what makes you happy. It's a celebration, it's a party, it's meant
Mm-hmm.
to, like, you shouldn't be nervous for it, you should be excited about it, because that's a celebration of all of your hard work. But if you weren't able to do that race, like, nothing really changes. You're still a better person, you're stronger than you were, you're healthier than you were, you put in all of this work, and yeah, you didn't get to enjoy the fruits of all of your labor at that point, but that's not really what it's about. It's
Mm-hmm.
about, if you train for 6 months, that one day means nothing at the end of, when you look back on life, all of those lessons were in the 6 months, not on that one day that you actually performed. And I think that it comes down to, and this is right with Rob's question, that, like, it's not about a ceiling, it's not about reaching a goal, it's not about blowing the ceiling off of something, it's more so about progression in your life, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of the growth and the challenges that you overcome. Then, hey, when I'm at this point in my life, or when I'm at this point in my career, I pretty much exhausted everything that I can do to be successful. Like, what's next? Um, and I don't necessarily think it's about a goal, or you're going to reach a certain point there, which kind of defers back to not necessarily feeling as if there is a ceiling.
Yeah, and I mean, that that reference to like moving the goalpost constantly, while I think in one way, or especially in like relating to happiness, it can be looked at negatively, but that just, is, as you said, it's just the progression, and it's what I'm trying to progress, you know, forward in my life, and how that relates to me professionally, personally, for my family's sake, all of that. It just, it's constantly constant progress.
Exactly. Like the fact that you are moving the goalpost
Mm-hmm.
and progressing and growing, like that should be celebrated.
Right, where it's like the ceiling would be if I reached the goalpost and just skated.
That's it.
And I
Yeah.
think and I don't wanna discredit that because a lot of people find happiness in that, where it's like, "Hey, I wanna just make it to this point, and then I'll be good." And because that's a very real a lot of people are like that. A lot of people just wanna hit a certain point, and then they're good. They don't need to make more money, or, like, at least in relation to that, someti or or maybe it's working out. It's like, "Hey, I'm in good shape. I just wanna maintain this physique," or, "I wanna maintain running a 10-minute mile." Like, and that's it. And then you have the other guys that aren't, or the other people that aren't happy, and they become they're not content with their progress. They want to run a 9, 8, 7-minute mile, and it's like the constant progress. And then I want to run 7-minute mile without taking a sip of water, or without having knee pain at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, whatever path, like, whatever makes sense for you. Ultimately, it's a matter of, like, how do you get to happiness? But again, going back to Rob's question, the ceiling of my professional career, like, I don't think I'm anywhere near
Yeah.
that ceiling. You know, to answer it specifically, you know, we are still growing as a business. The last, gosh, 30 months, 2.5 years, I would say that we have been so hyper focused on building the structure in our company just so it operates better. It operates more like a machine. It's a process in which, you know, things happen in order of operations, everything. Why? Because I want everyone to have a clear role. I want everyone to My goal with everyone individually is to have autonomy of their success, where it's like, if they understand how to bring more value, they can be compensated more money, right? You bring more value, you're paid more money. But also, it's a matter of, for us and for the business, it's like there's a ton of work out there that we don't even have access to yet. Clientele that we don't even have the ability to talk to because they don't know who we are. Like, that's untapped. Never mind the leads that are sitting in my inbox right now that are all great projects that I just simply don't have the time to even price, and I might just lose because I can't get back to them.
Yeah.
So that, professionally, like, I want to we want to continue to build out our process, and find a way to have the ability to, again, further delegate and define, where it's I my goal personally in the business and all of the businesses is to have, like, be less hands-on day to day. And we've talked about that so loosely, but I mean, like, very, like, I want people to be in the business that are focused on very particular things. You know, right now, for us, we are interviewing people for pre-construction. I've always done the pre-construction. A lead comes in, I nurture it, I do the pricing, I give them a proposal. I don't want to do that anymore. And it's
What kind of made you want to create this autonomy for people and be able to step back? Like what was the catalyst for all of that
because
internally?
people kept coming to me with questions that I couldn't answer. What or I would answer one way, and then the next week I would answer a different way. And that could have been like, what's the vision of the company? What do you want to eventually do? And I would just, like, spit off, like, what was top of mind at the moment. And that will always continue to change. But it's like, well, how do I make more money? Or, like, when am I a carpenter and not and when am I a lead carpenter? And how do I become a super? And what's my role as a super? And, is the natural growth, carpenter to super to PM to what? And all of these questions kept coming up. It's like, you know, how do I define that? And it's like, for me to sit there and define that on a piece of paper, it's way more complicated than that. It's a matter of understanding, what drive, like, the the input of each person and how that directly relates to the success of the company.
Is that why you feel that's so important?
It is, yeah. Because if I can understand, someone just commented on YouTube that I sound like the worst boss ever. Thanks, bud. I love that I have the comments open too, by the way. But for me, it's, I think it's important because I want everyone to understand who they are and their value that they bring to the company. And because I want them to understand their ability to grow. If they understand what value they bring to the company, they can understand how to bring more value. Or if they're the type of person that just wants to be at a particular level and, we'll call it plateau, they know they've reached there and they're gonna coast at that moment. But it's the guys that are asking me like, well, how do I make more money, or how do I take on more responsibility, or how do I do this, or how do I have the opportunity to do that? I want to help outline that. So like these roles that we're hiring are roles that we've spent enough time defining and putting into a place where it's, now it's a matter of taking it off someone else's plate, i.e. me right now. And so I can continue to focus on vision of what the company will be, what the company could be, and then adapting that. I've said for the last year now that I wanted to move some of our business into developing. And I see that developing anywhere right now. Like if you ask me, I see it as 1 to 6 family projects. And next year it might, someone might ask me again. I might say, yeah, we're going to do a 20 unit project. I don't know. And that's where it's like, I want to be able to understand and fine tune what we're doing. But I can't focus on what that is if I'm constantly in the day-to-day and trying to help every single person individually as to like how they grow their role, because I'm also trying to grow my role and trying to progress.
Yeah, I think that when you get into the type of structure that you are and you're still very involved and you're still the face of the company and people want to come work for you and they want your insight and they want your input, that they're going to look to you for that and for guidance and for, how do we progress in my role, in my career. And I know that that's really important for people when you work for somebody, like how you're going to move up, how you're going to grow internally, how you're going to make more money. And there's a lot of businesses and companies and cultures out there that have a formulaic approach to that, where like, right, you move up internally, you go and you switch offices, and then you do this for a couple years. Then as soon as you do that, then you'll have an opportunity to do this. And our business and our industry isn't like that. It's all just kind of like, how much time have you put in? What's your production look like? Are you efficient? Are you making me more money? I can pay you more money, as much money as you make me. But there's no actual structure to kind of moving up within a company, and trying to figure that out with no point of reference is tough.
Right. And I think, ultimately to rephrase the answer to my question, why I want this is because I want to be able to build the coolest homes, the biggest, like not biggest, the coolest, like the most detailed, the most, elaborate homes, stuff that is few and far between, not just a commodity product. And in order to do that, you need a really well-trained team and a process to get there.
So that's your goal. I understand that. And it's like, so when I think I want to build the coolest shit ever, it's actually building the coolest shit ever. Or I want to get to a certain point. What's driving you to get there if you're pulling back? Is it just putting all the pieces together and watching like this entire machine come together and just run and create this product? Or is it the chase of the jobs to try and land these jobs and land these customers? Or is it just the chase of getting to a point in your career where you're in that pool of contractors? Like it's almost,
there's no part of me that has ever thought about being in a particular pool of contractors. It is directly related to working with people that just want to build cool shit. My favorite part of my job is when I sit in a room and we're early in the design or we're on site and we're thinking through details and talking about how we can execute something, and we just get wild with it.
So I guess my question is like that to me is that's something that's like palpable, that's concrete, that's tangible, that you're helping sort out these details, and there's a very like a creative part of you that that's fulfilling. As you pull back and you say that you want to be more visionary, do you still want to handle that aspect of it? Because it's and that
I want to be involved.
yeah, so I'm trying to connect the dots, right? It's almost like I want to build the coolest shit ever, but I also want to pull back. So like at what point are you still fulfilling that creative aspect of yourself?
I don't want to pull back. I want to delegate the tasks that I'm not good at
Okay.
or that I'm not efficient at. Where it's like I'm interviewing someone for the pre-construction role. I'm not efficient at pre-construction. I can get it done, but I oftentimes will fire through like to go through a set of drawings and write scope for every trade. I don't have enough focus to do that.
Yeah.
I'll get through, up to division 5, and then I'll hit division 6. And then it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. And it's like, then by the time I get down to the electrical division, my scope is just, completely diluted.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's people out there that's what they're good at. And I need them to fulfill that role. I can sell, I'm good at the marketing, but I'm not doing all the marketing. I'm leading, I'm in charge of it. It all, ultimately comes down to me, but I have a team that works on it, that does the copy, that does the branding, that does the web. We had, Drew on the podcast, like he's part of my team. And it's, and then we have Doug and Anna and Catherine, like they're all part of that marketing side and content side.
Yeah.
And, and those are because those people are good at what they do. I understand what I want the vision to be and what I want and where I want that stuff to go. I'm not making every decision. I'm just helping guide that vision, where it's like, hey, whatever it is, whether I'm giving examples or asking for examples, and then kind of getting that focus for where we want to head.
So when you think, right, that your goal is to build the coolest shit ever, and you get to that goal, you reach that goal, you achieve that, what does that look like as far as like fulfillment for yourself? What are you going to get out of that accomplishment?
I think this is where I relate it to art. I think that, I think the art perspective is where the fulfillment will come, and I think the fulfillment will come in a number of different ways, from completing the project as a team, from the homeowner moving in, but also for being recognized as what that is, like, people oohing and ahhing over what we've built and asking questions like, oh my gosh, how did you build that? Or this is so cool, or I've never seen anything like it. Like, I'm not going to say that that's my main driving force behind wanting to do it. Ultimately, like, I want to do it for me, and like my role, but I also wanted to do it for my team, the homeowner, and then just the public and everyone. I want everyone to look at it and be inspired by it. And, there's been conversations we've had on this podcast where, I forget who it was, but, it was like, I was almost like walking the line of, well, why aren't you an architect if you like design that much? Or why don't you focus on the design or focus on architecture? It's like, because that's not, I'm not going to be good at that.
Yeah.
I'm way more micro focused when it comes to detail, where it's like, if you show me, if you say, hey, this is how we're going to build this house and this is the shape of it and here are all the rooms, from there I can take it. But I couldn't sit with a blank piece of paper and like actually design a house. It's just not, my mind just doesn't work that way. where it's like, well, hey, how would you approach this hyper detail right here where all the millwork ties into the outside corner of this hallway that has negative reveal baseboard? It's like, I can work through that. That's where
That's
I'm gonna, focus my attention.
and that's what I think, kind of speaking to you and hearing what you're saying, that you just need to make sure that you're not discrediting how much involvement you still want on a day-to-day basis, because it sounds like when you say you want to be a visionary for your company, that it's almost like you could open 6 businesses and you can be the visionary for these businesses and where they're going, and not necessarily
Mm.
like the businesses almost don't matter what they are, right? You're just so concerned with growing the business, but for your customers, for designers, for your employees' sake, like the vision for your business is to grow it, to have an opportunity to build the best stuff ever, so that you can be critical with these details and still be involved and challenged. Not as much as just like, hey, I'm going to grow this business to get there. Like, you still want to be a part of that building process.
I do, but I don't want to be. I don't want the business to rely on that.
For sure.
I would love to be able to build this business so there's value to it beyond just a quote unquote fee-based business, where the value of a construction business is typically very low. And because it's so tied back to the individual that, typically owns the business. I don't want that. I want to build a business that has value to it, because we've established the systems. We've established the process in which we build. There is a course that someone could follow on how to run that business. Now, my involvement might, push us, into a particular clientele or land us some work, but ultimately I get to a point where there's people that work within this business that can do the same thing, that step into the role of facilitating those relationships and those opportunities.
Yeah. And that your business is a construction business. Like, you have enough pride in this industry and enough passion for this industry that this is where all of that effort is going to manifest itself. It's not a visionary is like, hey, I'm going to open a tech company 2 weeks from now because like I just have this vision for building businesses. It's everything behind this is still the passion for the industry and the passion for building and craftsmanship and kind of creating the best product that you possibly can, and putting together a team that has an opportunity to do that.
Right. And so when I think about the ceiling, going back to Rob's question, like the ceiling for me, it's infinite.
Yeah.
And, I want to build better homes and better homes and work with better and better clients and better architects. And I don't want to discredit any single client. Well, I'll rephrase that. There was definitely a few clients that I would, um, definitely discredit, that I would not want to work for again. But there's plenty of clients, especially our current clients. Like, they're great, and there's nothing wrong with them. But ultimately, the product that we want to build and be known for, doesn't align with all of the clients that we're currently working with. So when I say better and better clients, it's I'm not saying that these ones are bad. I'm saying that these ones are great. I just want to continue to work with people like that or better,
Yeah.
and not trend in the opposite direction.
It's I wrote a blog post and recorded it today, and it got me thinking a lot about screening customers and how you have to be careful, and it's kind of what you're touching on now, like towing that line between saying, no, I can't work for you, no, it's not what we want to do. And it's not necessarily because you don't have the money or you don't fit a certain class type, but it's just having an opportunity to work for people and do this stuff that you want to do. And a lot of times I think that it comes off as being conceited or arrogant, or that you are passing judgment on somebody, but it's not the case at all. For me, it was the realization that you can own, like, how many jobs a year can you do based
Mhm.
on the scale of your company? I want one, to ensure that I'm as profitable as possible. Two, that I'm being challenged with the work and doing the jobs that I want to do. And three, that I like my customers. So there's a specific customer base that kind of affords me those three luxuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what class type generally they fit, where those houses are located, and it's not about me classifying people as, hey, you don't have enough money for me to work for you, or you don't have enough disposable income. It's just selfishly, I want to be in a position where I get to do the stuff that I want to do. And generally, that's going to be a very specific customer. And even like, it's tough because past customers that were great customers, I don't want to work for anymore. It's just because like they don't allow me to do what I want to be doing. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
really tough position to be in, because it's like I want to be loyal to these customers who invested in me early on. But again, it's just like my time is so limited. So where do I spend it?
I want to touch on something that came up in the comments that's related to that. Comment says construction business only really works when you get skilled contractors that will work at slave wages to feed their families, unfortunately. And that really pisses me off. And it's a conversation I had last week with another contractor. And this is one of the issues that the entire industry has brought amongst itself, where we continue to drive price down, especially with individual subcontractors, right? And we need your best price. We need you to your best price. We need you to do it faster and faster and faster. And while we did that, we kept making the homes bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's like everyone wants a more expensive home, and the argument oftentimes come up when we talk about wanting to work with better clients and more expensive clients. It's like, well, what about the people that are middle class or lower class? Like, they deserve homes too. They absolutely do. But the thing is like, especially in the middle class, like, people try to get the most out of it, biggest house, for the least amount of money. They're extending themselves. They're working at the top of their financial capabilities, and they're getting a bigger house based on the fact that a builder built it with lesser quality trades, or paid the trades a lesser wage, where the reality is, if everyone, and this is what we talked about with Mike Rowe on my Instagram live thing I did with him, is that if all of these trades made a better living, if we were able to get them to a more substantial, better living, and across the board, everyone, that would drive the cost of construction up,
Yeah.
right? Sure. And like, you can't do that. We need to build homes. That's why, we need these lesser paying jobs. It's, if everyone made more money, the cost of construction would be more expensive, and you would be required to build a smaller home. What's wrong with that? You don't get your finished basement or your home office or the billiards room. It's like,
It doesn't portray your ego
right.
if you have a big home.
And
If you don't have a big home.
and this is the issue. It's like, we, instead of driving the driving force being a better quality home and a better quality using trades that are paid a fair wage, we are driving the opposite. How much home can I get for how little money?
I think
And
it's the type of company that you want to run and the type of work that you want to be putting out, because
Mhm.
I can tell you that most of the time our budgets, our preliminary budgets, and what the budget actually comes back at by the time we get subs out and everything, it's typically higher than what we initially anticipated. And it's because we've gone through the scope and we've worked out the details and we've properly conveyed and articulated that to our subs.
Mhm.
And we've had the conversation with them where it's like, hey, I want you to cover yourself here. I don't want you working for free. I don't want you working, and if it's going to cost more, I'd rather you pad yourself now so that you're making money on this. Because if you're making money, I'm making money, and the customers are going to get a great product. And that comes down to, the type of business that I want to be running and how I want to support my sub base. And there's been very few times in my career where I've gotten pricing for somebody and I've then gone back and be like, hey, you know what, we can we can work on this number or this number. I know that this is high, and I think that we could shop this and possibly do better here. But 99% of the time, the cost is the cost, because I know that this is what it costs my subs to do the work and provide a living for themselves. I could very easily go out and find subs that are much less expensive, but you're not going to get what you're going to get with my subs. And it's not what I want to sell, and it's not what I want to support. And I feel like I'm perpetuating the issue that this person's suggesting within the comments within our industry.
And to argue that, right? Well, it's like, how do we get costs down? And my team says the same thing. It's, we talk about, well, how am I supposed to get this down? I'm not going to use a lesser quality trade here, because then we're just going to eat it on the back end. That's not the point. Obviously, it starts with the home. Build a smaller home, a less complex home, less whatever it is. But there's also the whole inefficiency of residential construction. An enormous cost to building residential is the inefficiencies that we face, and whether that's oftentimes led to poor planning, where it's, we would love to be completely planned out, all of the details planned, all of the details figured out, the drawings 100%, and then build from that and not have any questions. If we were able to truly do that, we would save a lot of costs, and a lot of those costs are derived from time, right? Time chasing down answers, and then your painter is waiting for colors and shows up and leaves and then comes back and then charges you extra because he had to remobilize. Like, there's so many inefficiencies that just get wrapped up in the cost of doing the project. And not only are they, that example, like the painter leaving, coming back, charging you to remobilize, that might be that one case. But then the next job he does for you is more money, because he's going to automatically assume that he's going to have to mobilize 5 times.
Yeah.
And the question never comes up as to, hey, I understand this is your price. Is it, rather than say I need a better price, it's, hey, is there anything I could do to make your job more efficient? And we've had that conversation where it's like, with a painter, and he's like, let me be the last person in there and we can shave 10% off this cost. And that's not, hey, I want a discount. It's, how do I make your job more efficient? If your job is more efficient, it's taking you less time, which costs less money. Your margin should still be the same. I'm not asking you to take a lesser margin. I'm asking you to reduce the time so we can be more efficient. And it's, it's this thought of, how do we systemize things? And it's like, we can relate it back to prefabrication or modular homes or panelization. It's like, yes, there's horror stories about that stuff, but the idea is right. The idea is that, how do we control the construction more? How do we be more controlled? Have controlled construction, so when this stuff is going together, it's not a matter of figuring it out constantly on the spot, wasting hours and hours of time and material, and do this and undo that and fix this and fix that. It's, no, we're thinking all of this stuff through. Now, I'm trying to play both sides of the coin here. It's like, well, then the argument comes up. It's like, well, now you're spending a ton of time or a ton of money on architecture. It's like, right, well, if the client it has the means to do so, they should be spending more time on architecture, so that home is built efficiently, not only just for the cost of construction, but the efficiency of the people, the time that people put into it, the efficiency and use of materials, and how it relates to the environment. Well, it's like, well, you can't spend that much time and money on a $400,000 home. It's like, you're right. You can't spend that. You can't spend $100,000 in architecture designing a $400,000 home. It just doesn't make sense. But if you're building a $400,000 home, maybe you work within something that's already been designed.
Yeah.
Maybe you create efficiency by building a process that is repeatable. That, yes, it's a home that you've kind of tweaked, semi-custom, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, you've built a process into understanding how to build a $400,000 home the most efficient way possible. And here's the 15 things that you can change to make it your own. And why isn't that okay? And what you said, it's because the ego. I want to build a custom one.
Yeah.
I want to start from scratch and make it 100% mine. It's like, well, then the cost is going to be very, very high.
And it's interesting because I found that like the knee-jerk reaction when the budget doesn't fit is, where could we cut costs? Let's go to subs, let's go to labor. When it's not, hey, let's touch design, let's touch finishes, everyone wants all of that stuff, and they're willing to negotiate on labor costs because they feel that's negotiable, because that has been the status quo within our industry for so long. And even even the fact that people are saying, hey, this price is high, these subs are high, it's more than I thought it would be. It's relative to what's going on within the industry. And this goes back to this comment that everyone wants everyone to work for nothing, and that's just the way that our industry has been for so long. And it's very price driven. And hey, this guy said he could do it for this much, and then you give him this job, and it's brought on by the consumer, and we've allowed it to continue, because we fear that we won't have work, or that's the value that we can bring to customers, is giving them a lower price or giving them more for less.
Right.
When
more for less, when it directly relates to hurting your partners, your trade partners.
And there's a time and a place for that. That there's plenty of people that don't value what I do and don't value what you do, and that's fine. Like, if I built a house for myself, I wouldn't build it to the spec that I build homes for my customers, because personally, like, it's not something that I value as much as my customers value. And like, I would rather spend my money or my time elsewhere, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I know that my customers value that, and I value working in that manner. So that's the type of work that I do. So there's a time and a place for everything, but the entire, like, the kind of gray cloud that's over the industry, as far as everyone has to work for less, and it's got to be piss poor wages, and everyone has to like subcontract out to different contractors and keep their overhead low and not keep everyone on board, and whatever it is, as far as hiring people who like aren't insured. That's all to benefit the customer and the consumer. Like, how is that benefiting us as contractors, other than like you landed a job? But like, that's to come in at a lower cost for and so you're putting yourself and your reputation, your subcontractors, your family, all at risk to please a customer. And that's just kind of the way that our industry has been for so long, and everything's been negotiable. And again, there's a time and a place for doing inexpensive renovations, but not when it comes down to health, safety, reputation, or putting yourself at risk.
I'm glad you bring up the safety thing, because I think this is, and risk, right? Where, someone gets hurt on a job site. If you don't have your shit together because you can't afford to do it, and you're putting the homeowner at risk for that, right? I'll we had a guy slip and fall on one of our jobs recently, and thankfully he's okay. But he went to the hospital. OSHA showed up to the job site, like within 30 minutes, did an inspection. We had our shit together. We hired a safety officer that is on retainer with us. It's an expense out of our bottom line, but we said that we need to do this to make sure that not only are our guys safe, but our trade partners are safe. And furthermore, that our homeowner and everyone is protected legally from a risk perspective. Where it's like, if we didn't have our stuff together and we just hired anyone that we don't know if they're trained to be up there, or they had the proper training, or we had the proper guardrails in place, like, that person could have got hurt, and that the homeowner would have paid for that in one way or the other, or could have been on the hook for it. And the reality is if you're going to drive these guys down in price, they're never going to be able to afford to hire quality people. And this actually came up in an email this morning, Tyler. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
Someone was asking about hiring people and like, how do you hire quality people? It's like, you got to pay them well.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with these trades. It's like, you want quality trades, you got to pay them well. And ultimately, it's your job. If you're going to be the builder, the GC, like, it is your job to sell this to the client, to turn around and tell the client that you can do it for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And then by accomplishing, in order to accomplish doing it cheaper, now you're working with lesser quality trades that is putting the client at risk.
But
and let me just finish that point. Sorry. When you're putting that client at risk, like, the reality is a lot of times it's fine, because like nothing ever happens. And this is the whole business of insurance, right? It's like everything's fine until it's not. Where it's like, you do all these homes, everything's fine, you're grinding people, you're getting shit done. The client never sees anything. Then you have a job and someone gets hurt, and then the right parameters aren't in place, and that person goes after the homeowner and sues the homeowner. And it's like, if in that moment, and that client says, why am I not protected? It's like, well, you wanted a lesser price. If I had said, hey, it's going to be $40,000 more to build this house if you want everyone to be insured, so if someone gets hurt, they can't come after you. You think you'd say yes to that? Probably.
But customers so often are willing to forego a lot of that accountability and responsibility in lieu of what you're saying, right? Until it goes wrong. Like, they're willing to say,
I'll take the risk.
You know what? Let's not buy the $500 shower diverter that's got a lifetime warranty and rebuildable. Let's do the $200 one, because we have 3 bathrooms that's going to save us, $1,000 and labor
I'd rather
costs.
have a plumber on site that knows how to put together a gas pipe that's not going to leak and blow up my house.
Exactly. But so they're fine with that until that valve goes bad and it's not serviceable. And now you have to pull the wall open. And so that's the type of stuff where, you can offer those options if that's what somebody needs to hit budget, but you also need to do your best job explaining to them the potential repercussions of doing so, because they're not going to like you when that's the case, when you have to rip a wall open and it's going to cost you twice as much, but they're fine at the initial thought of saving $1,000.
And dude, this is something that we're dealing with right now when it comes to insurance. For example, like, as we've grown as a business, our insurance continues to increase. And when we were doing a lot in these high-rise buildings, the insurance requirements are very, very high.
Yeah.
And so we have these $5 million policies, and I actually don't know, but the parameters of it, but they're big policies. And, so when we got strict with our insurance for our trades, we were unable to work with a lot of the trades that we were, because they didn't have a policy that matched ours. And I was like, well, so, okay. So like, I'm having these conversations on and off record with my insurance company that I'm like, so what's my risk? Like, why can't I work with them? And I remember one specific, it was a cleaner. And I was like, that cleaner's not going to carry a $5 million policy. They're in there for an hour to clean, and that's it. They're like, well, technically you can't work with them. I'm like, what do you mean I can't work with them? They're like, they're required to meet your requirements or you take all the risk.
Yeah, you have to
And
cover that.
And I'm like, well, walk me through this. And I'm like, so you're saying that if my cleaner goes there with a vacuum and the vacuum cord sparks and lights the whole house on fire and burns a $5 million house down, he's like, your insurance would have to cover that. And theirs would like only cover, say, $500,000, whatever their policy was. And I'm like, and then what? He's like, well, your insurance company would probably drop you because like you hired a trade that didn't have the proper insurance. But and the point of all that is like, we're now having these conversations with our trades where it's like, our trades are calling like, hey, you want me to have this policy, but it's $12,000 more a year. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, I'm charging you for that. I'm like, as you should.
Exactly. And that's what like one of the comments, doing it right is so expensive. It shouldn't be expensive for us. If you live in a high rise where it costs everyone else more money to work there, more time, then you should be willing to bear the cost of that lifestyle. If you live in a $4 million house, $5 million house, you should be willing to pay the added insurance cost of everyone who comes onto your
Right.
property work. Like that's
Not be at the
your
top of your
lifestyle.
financial capabilities. Don't buy the Lamborghini if you can't afford the $18,000 oil change.
Exactly. Like that's your lifestyle that you're looking to adopt and kind of lead.
Mm.
That's not on us to handle and bear those costs. That's the cost of living. That's a lifestyle that you chose. That's the difference. If I were working in a high rise or I was working in my neighbor's house and it cost me more money to your work in your high rise, I can't work for you at the same rate than I can work for my neighbor. And I
Right.
shouldn't have to. And that cost shouldn't get spread across all of my customers if I only have one or two customers in those high rises. I'm not going
Mhm.
to make every other one of my customers
Right.
foot that bill.
And this is where, this is actually one of the things we talk about at the coalition summit, and it's about job costing and some of the things that people don't realize, and insurance is a great example, where it's like you're required to carry insurance just to be in business, but for every dollar that you sell, your insurance is adjusted a percentage based on that sale of that job. And these high rise projects that they're millions of dollars. So it might be 1 to 2% of that cost is going to just general liability on that just for that project. And that's a job cost
Mm-hmm.
that gets billed to the client. And exactly your point, that this isn't a cost to us. This is an overhead. This is because I'm working in your building. This is a requirement to work in the building that you purchased, or this is a requirement for me to build your house. I am required to carry insurance to cover for this project. If I don't do this project, I don't have to pay that.
Yeah.
So if I don't have to pay it, then that means it's a job cost because it's directly related to that project. And going back to the trades, it's like, well, they're telling me, well, I'll have to bill you for that. It's like, I understand. I'm not asking you to come to the table with, hey, see what you can get away with, like see what things you can do under the radar so we can like shave this cost down. Where it's like, no, I want you to make sure that you're protected. Like, because that's the whole point of insurance. That's the whole point of being careful. You're putting yourself, like, obviously you go into this hoping for the best, but you have to prepare for bad outcomes, because you don't want one bad outcome to be what ruins your career.
I remember when I first went into business and doing bathroom remodels and working for friends. And you do a couple where you're doing everything yourself, and I'm charging 2 weeks labor, just my labor, to do a bathroom renovation. And then you start landing more jobs and you want to start doing things right, and you're going through the permitting process and you're realizing it's going to cost you X amount more to get a plumber and electrician there. And immediately that's essentially slapping that right on top of my fee, which was the same when I was doing all of that myself, maybe a couple $100 different. Cause it's like, all right, I'm going to pull out a day and a half labor or whatever it is to rough this in. And I was like, how am I ever going to get jobs? Right. If I'm adding, like, right now, it was all inexpensive numbers, but it's like, all right, so you're in for 10 grand and now I'm trying to charge like 14 essentially for the same bathroom. Everyone's going to laugh in my face.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I realized that those people who wanted a $10,000 bathroom, they didn't want it to be, they didn't want a plumber there. They didn't want an electrician there. And I would never sell those bathrooms to those people. And I had to find the customer who was willing to pay to have it done right. And now you're at like 14 to 20 grand. And maybe that is very similar to the same bathroom that I was selling for 10 grand without permits and everything else. But at the end of the day, that bathroom was licensed, inspected, everything was done with the township for taxes, and now my ass is covered, the customer's ass is covered, all my subs' asses are covered, and that's the people who want that are willing to pay the $15,000 to $20,000 to get that done.
Right.
And it was a big eye opener for me when I was transitioning in business from doing that type of work early on, where I was like, how I'm never going to sell this. Like, I have trouble selling a $10,000 bathroom right now. And I mean, I look at that now and things have changed, and I can't imagine making money doing the type of work I do now for those rates. But it's no different than saying, like, people are willing to pay more now because of what I do now and the reputation, the system, and everything that I've developed, and that kind of is in line, and makes sense to me. But you have to realize that the customers are only going to hire you for what you value and for what you're bringing to the table and the type of work that you're doing. And if you have a high rise customer who's not willing to pay the $5,000 to $10,000 on top of the project for everyone to get specialty insurance, like, they're not going to hire you anyway. They're going to look to save and pinch a penny elsewhere, and they're not concerned with protecting you. And at that point, it's like, that should be a huge red flag that they are not somebody that you want to be working for.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I just was looking this up because I had mentioned it in that email earlier. But what you just said, like selling it to the people that value it, this kind of relates. And if you give the whole episode a listen, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's called Billionaire Recession Advice: Selling to the Rich. And it's the podcast is called The Game with Alex Hermosi, and it's episode 490. But he talks about alignment with like your end client, and I think that while it's selling to the rich is the topic, you can relate that to and define rich however you want, right? The guy that can afford $10,000 bathroom might be considered rich by many, right? So the premise is there is that you have to align with the right client. The person that wasn't going to spend $14,000 and only wanted to spend 10 was price driven, and they wanted to spend 10 because $10,000 was probably a large sum of their net worth. Where it's like, well, if you found the right client that could afford the $14,000 and you solve the problem of putting them at risk, it's like, hey, I'm going to do this the right way, hands off. You don't have to worry about it. They value that.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, and you need, and this goes back to something someone said earlier, but in the comments, but this goes back to, the education. You're gonna, until the entire industry is operating this way, or at least the peer group that you are constantly working up against, right? Until they're operating on the same wavelength, you are going to always face the challenge of the guy being $10,000 when you're at 14 and then having to explain that. And it kind of sucks to be like, oh, well, that guy probably doesn't have insurance on all his trades. And, you could be at risk for this going sideways. God forbid anything ever went sideways. And they'd be like, okay, I mean, it's probably not going to go sideways, and I'll save $4,000. Yeah, that sounds great.
But here's the issue that I have there, that you're putting everything at risk for that customer, right? Because say they're getting a $10,000 bathroom that's unpermitted that would cost somebody 15 to 20 if they did it the right way. They want something that they truthfully can't afford to do the right way. So if
right,
they want an upgraded bathroom at that cost price point. If they were to pay for a $10,000 bathroom that was done the right way and on the books and with permits, they would have a PVC shower surround and, a vinyl floor in their shower, and it would be not a full
because
gut and just
they're not trying to do something at the top of their capability.
Exactly, but it's like, so the customer wants more than they're able to afford, and you're going to risk everything that you have
Right.
to be able to give them that. And when shit hits the fan, and when there's a fire or their plumbing line leaks because you didn't replace the lead bend because you didn't have a plumber do it, and you didn't replace any of the galvanized water lines, and there's an issue and everything floods, and they go to their insurance company, like, that's going to come back on you. And they're not going to stand behind you. They're not going to say, hey, you know what? Like, we really wanted to do this, that our contractor told us we didn't need it. And they're going to come after you. And like, that's the difference there. And offering that to people when you're starting out, it's one thing. When you start to learn and you realize what's right and what's wrong and what you're willing to stand behind, I think that if our entire industry just took a more logical, respectable approach to what they were doing and weren't looking to appease a customer's budget and put their reputation at risk for that. And this isn't even doing high-end work. It's just doing things the right way.
Right.
I think that our industry would be in a much different position.
Yeah, and that will continue to be the challenge, where it's like we will always have the we will always have this group of I'm trying to say this correctly. We'll always have people that are going to be taking the shortcut. There's no doubt. And that's not just our industry, it's every industry, right? And there's plenty of hacks out there. There's plenty in so many industries. And until we educate, until we spread awareness, until we correct this direction of, driving price and quality down in order to build a bigger and or just a bigger house, not a better house, but a bigger house. Until we correct that, looking at the big picture, it's going to continue to get worse. It's like rather than square foot cost and how that relates to everything. It's like, oh, as we're getting into the development side, we're seeing it even more so. Like as we have a property that is going to be a development for us, an NS Builders developed project, and everything is based on the cost of construction per foot, everything. And it's, I had plenty of conversations where I tried to explain my way out of that, and they're like, nope, I just don't give it, don't give a shit. Like this needs to fall within the parameters for funding, like specific to funding. And it's someday I'll talk about that whole funding process, because that was like a college course in 3 weeks. But it was so interesting where I had to basically work in a very different way in order for me to get to kind of a green light. And now that we have a green light, it's like, all right, well, here are my parameters I have to build this project within. I still need to produce a project that will perform as an NS Builders exclusive home. And how do I, and now I have to figure out how to do that.
The easy part.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like to think that things are moving in the right direction with everything that we're doing and with our industry. And I think that a lot of times it's slightly convoluted, and our perspective of things being around so many contractors and subcontractors, builders and renovators who are really putting themselves out there and doing the best work that they can. It's sometimes doesn't, it seems like we're headed in the right direction. I think that we still have a really long way to go. That there's a lot of people who don't think the same way that we do. I actually just had an insurance audit, which I guess was a workers' comp insurance audit. And I was talking to the lady. My bookkeeper got all my paperwork and everything in order because I don't handle any of that stuff. So everything that they asked for, she got them. Did I just unplug my computer?
No, you're good.
So everything that she asked for, my bookkeeper got for the accountant, or for the auditor, and I met, and she went through everything, and I was talking to her about like what she's doing with her job, why she's auditing, and essentially she said that with COVID and all the money that they paid out for unemployment, they're now going back to the year after, during and after, to ensure that all subcontractors were carrying unemployment and were paying into unemployment, because they put so much money in unemployment that now it's the same thing, right? If I carry my insurance and it's on the up and up, and then I hire a subcontractor, they have to carry that insurance and workers' comp. And if they don't, then the insurance company will come back to me, and I will have to foot the bill on whatever I paid them because they weren't covering that. And I was just talking to her about like our industry, and if she just did audits for construction, and she said she did all other industries. And she said, typically the construction industries are the hardest. And I was like, how come? She said, nobody has any paperwork in order. They don't know what they have to do. They don't know what insurances they need. They take so long. She's like, everything of yours was perfectly in order. It's very quick, very straightforward. Everything was on the up and up. And I was like, all right, well, that really has nothing to do with me. I pay somebody to do all of that. She's like, yeah, but you had all your paperwork. Your subs were all online. Everything was legit. And I started talking to her about our industry and like the barriers to entry. And she had no idea within New Jersey, and all she does is audits for New Jersey, that essentially there's no business licensing, there's no testing or anything like that. And she's like, now that you say that, it makes so much sense, because a lot of the business owners that I meet with, like, they have no business sense. They don't understand what it takes to run a business. They don't have their numbers in order. And like, somebody needs to be teaching these people, or kind of not allowing them to be in business for themselves if they don't have the knowledge and the skill set to be doing this, because
Right.
nothing's on the up and up. So many people are at risk, and it makes her life so much harder. And it's just a shame to think that like that is the majority of our industry. And it's fighting a very tough battle. And it's almost as though you have to completely differentiate yourself so that you're not competing with those people. And I think at the end of the day, it all of that is to appease our customers, and we put ourselves at risk to appease our customers and to make them happy, and it's not necessarily about what's right for us. And that's what's kind of sad and frustrating to me.
Super. I'll be right back. I gotta take a quick pee break. Been drinking way too much water on this podcast. I'll be right back.
Do it. Quick interlude.
Much better.
It's funny because I have my headphones on and I didn't have the video up, and I just heard you come in and like hit the microphone, and it sounded like my dog was busting down the door. I'm like, what the hell is going on right now?
Whew.
So back to Rob's question as far as what's the plans for you guys professionally.
Yeah. What
For
about you?
myself, I'd like to continue to do a little bit of what I'm doing now. I'm still going to be doing the renovations, the remodels, and I'm going to devote a little bit more time to the podcast, to this midweek recording that we're doing, to the social side of things, to be able to kind of split my time between the two. We more and more realistically looking to move, potentially build. There's not a lot out there right now in the market for what I need and for what we want to be doing. So the idea of potentially buying some land and building a house, and then once that's done, moving into it, it's becoming more and more realistic. So that may be something that's coming up on the horizon. That would be pretty exciting and give me an opportunity to kind of dive into something else that I haven't done before and really expand my skill set and knowledge. I would be subcontracting a lot of the work there and managing more of that, which I think would be cool and would open the door to a lot of opportunity and a sub network and pool moving forward that would give me an ability to tackle some larger jobs. And I think, long term, that's probably more of the goal for me anyway, would be to be able to manage more, less tool belt on, still continue with the smaller cabinetry jobs and fill in stuff like that. So we'll see where the next year or two takes me. But that's kind of what's on the docket for the time being. I have work lined up through this year, the normal stuff, and we're kind of on the hunt for a house, for land potentially,
I
and
love that.
devoting a fair amount of time to podcast related stuff. So I don't know, we'll see where it all goes, but I have felt the past couple of months that like it's time for a change, it's time for something new. I kind of want to switch gears a little bit. So this is a perfect opportunity for me and a lot of potential there to kind of get the ball rolling in a different direction.
When you had texted me thinking about building, at first I was confused, but then you were like building a house. I'm like, dude, that, I'm excited for you, but I'm also excited to see how like you approach that.
Yeah.
Um,
So if we do build a house for ourselves, it will not be, it's not going to necessarily be what I do for customers. I think that we'll have to scale back a
well, you
little
said that.
bit.
Yeah, you don't value it as much as them either.
Yeah, I mean, there's just things that I wouldn't spend money on. I know my wife would probably love to, but the goal for me with a house, regardless of what we build or what we do, is that I want to build a house that 30 years from now is still in style. It's not overdone. There's enough reservation there. I'd like to build something that'll hold up and kind of stand the test of time from an efficiency standpoint and also from a design standpoint. So that's exciting too, to even start looking into designs and property and all of that stuff.
Love it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we kind of breezed over not breezed over, we talked about it all last week, but also would love everyone's feedback on the brand. We had another meeting this week. Our website, I think, is going live at the end of this week. So by the time you hear it, the website should be up. But man, I'm stoked with the brand, like on every level. And we've had a ton of people reach out about some swag. Number one, we owe some people some swag from the old brand. Number two, we have a bunch of leftover, so keep an eye out for some flash sales and giveaways. But number three, we are developing an entire line of some merch for you guys. So we hope to launch that shortly after the website goes live. But do us a favor, drop us a DM at Modern Craftsman Pod on Instagram. Let us know if you want some swag, what you'd love to see, we'll get a poll going and see what you guys would love to rock with the new branding on it, and we'll make sure we get that into the works ASAP.
Yeah, so I think that Nick, we had spoken offline a little bit about this, but potentially getting some stuff made for us, checking out the wear on it, seeing if you guys like it and what sort of demand there is for it at that point, and then probably put out some limited runs of stuff. So it's kind of smaller batch quantities, nicer stuff, and not just be like pumping out a ton of apparel and gear that, it's we want it to be nicer and kind of limited batch.
That's a great point. One of the things I talked to Drew about today was exactly that. Is that, rather than just buying another inexpensive T-shirt and getting our branding on it, let's make something nice. Let's make something that that is going to wear a long time. That's going to hold up. And not only that, but be something that they would, maybe then they would look at and be like, hey, I want my company on this. So we're early exploration with a local workwear brand that I think is going to help us with a lot of this. We've been testing it out for a little over a year now with our T-shirts. And then I think Tyler's got some samples on the way. So if it holds up to the two of us, well, especially Tyler. Tyler works harder than I do. Then I think we'll be golden.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be cool. I'm excited for the whole brand. It feels good. And again, this kind of comes back to, I mean, we've been working really hard at this, and it's been a good 5-6 years. It's had ups, it's had downs, but I feel we're at a point that we are hitting our stride, and we're taking money that was made and reinvesting it. We're closing up some things and starting some new things. We have a good team on board. Everyone's really putting in a lot of time and effort to do this. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and with the new brand partnerships and kind of what these companies stand for and why they're partnering with us in the first place, fully supporting everything that we're doing. It's going to give us a really good opportunity to have a great 2023. And I'm pretty excited to see where all of this goes.
Likewise. So with that being said, we appreciate you guys sticking around for all these years as we continue to roll into this new year. Big thank you to Andersen Windows and Buildertrend for partnering up with us to make all of this happen and be a resource for continued conversation in this industry around craftsmanship.
Absolutely.
See you guys next week.
Adios.